Elena Sinclair had always carried the weight of dual worlds, one of careful diligence and hidden talent, the other of constant observation and quiet, unacknowledged skill. As a child, she had spent countless evenings in the dim glow of her father's study, surrounded by wooden models of buildings and intricate drafting tools, learning lessons most kids only saw in textbooks. The strength of a structure isn't just in its foundation, her father would say, adjusting his spectacles and tracing a line with his pencil, it's in anticipating the pressures it will never tell you about. He had taught her to look for stress points not only in the beams and supports but in the assumptions, the oversights, and the tiny, often overlooked variables that most architects ignored. Those nights, filled with soft pencil scratches and her father's patient voice, had planted seeds of perception that would later bloom into a talent far beyond her years. By the time she was 17, Elena could glance at a blueprint and see the cracks before anyone else noticed them. Her sketches were clean but detailed, the lines precise, annotations meticulous, a reflection of both intuition and learned discipline. Yet, despite the brilliance her father had nurtured, life had forced her into the more immediate, pragmatic world of work. After her father passed, she had to balance tuition, living expenses, and the kind of entry-level jobs that demanded smiles, speed, and patience rather than intelligence. Waiting tables at one of the city's most prestigious skyline restaurants had become her current reality, a place where she honed not only her efficiency but her capacity for observation. Elena's mornings were ritualized, almost sacred. She arrived at the restaurant long before the first guests, tying her apron with the careful precision of someone who approached even the mundane with reverence. Her white shirt was always spotless, her black apron pressed, and her shoes polished to a shine. While the other waitstaff joked or complained about the day ahead, Elena went over mental notes, table assignments, preferred dishes for frequent patrons, possible service pitfalls, and, increasingly, overheard conversations about architecture, design, and construction. Those conversations were her secret delight, the pulse of her real world buried within a job that barely acknowledged her abilities. That day, the air was tense with quiet anticipation. A group of architects had taken the best corner table by the floor-to-ceiling windows, their voices a mix of hubris and technical jargon. Elena moved among the tables with practiced grace, balancing trays laden with glasses and plates, her mind half on her orders and half on the snippets of conversation she overheard. When the topic of Victor Hale's latest skyscraper arose, her ears perked up instinctively. She had studied architectural theory obsessively, poring over papers and models late at night, and she immediately sensed a flaw in the structure they discussed, a minor but crucial miscalculation that could cause stress points in one of the upper cantilevered floors. It was then that Hale entered the restaurant, a figure whose presence drew attention even in a room accustomed to the wealthy and influential. He moved with a predator's ease, the subtle sway of a man who knew the world bent to his influence. His silver-gray suit was impeccably tailored, catching the light without glinting, neutral and commanding. A pair of polished black shoes tapped against the polished hardwood floor with authority, accompanied by the faint clink of a pocket watch chain, a vestige of a meticulous attention to detail that matched the precision of his empire. Following him were three associates, men whose expensive attire and poised postures spoke of power brokered and influence inherited. They lingered behind him, laughing softly, deferential to his lead, yet each carrying the pride of belonging to his inner circle. Hale's eyes swept the room like a hawk scanning a meadow. He noticed Elena immediately, not for her efficiency or her diligence, but for her poise in the face of a room that often demanded perfection. There was something about her stance, the subtle tilt of her head as she balanced trays, that sparked his amusement and irritation simultaneously. As she approached his table to take orders, he leaned back slightly, a smirk forming on his lips. "Ah, the little waitress with a smile too polite for her own good," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge of derision. "Do you know your limits, miss? This isn't some college cafe. These are engineers, professionals. If you try to overstep, it might embarrass everyone involved, including you." Elena's hands tightened slightly around the tray, but her face remained calm, eyes level, lips neutral. Internally, she braced herself. She had learned to hold composure under mockery, to let wit and observation do the work for her. She knew this was his style. A test disguised as amusement, a provocation masked as arrogance. She kept her gaze forward, setting the glasses on the table with precision, and responded in a tone measured yet polite. "Of course, sir. I'll ensure nothing disrupts your table." The architects, noticing the tension, leaned in slightly, whispering among themselves, some smiling at the interaction. Hale's smirk widened. "Disrupt? We'll see about that. Perhaps you'll manage to spill something over yourself before the night is done." The comment drew quiet laughter from the table, a mix of amusement and the cruel curiosity of those who enjoyed seeing someone tested by power. Elena allowed herself a slight tilt of her chin, the hint of a smile just at the corners of her lips, not enough to break her professional demeanor but enough to signal that she was neither intimidated nor defeated. Service continued with Elena navigating the space carefully, every movement calculated, each step precise. She observed Hale's companions, their gestures, their subtleties, noticing the slight twitch of a hand when a glass was poured or the micro-expression when a comment landed. Her mind, trained by years of architectural analysis, processed the dynamics like a blueprint, the flow of movement, the tension points, the weight of authority. She knew she had to balance flawless service with the constant mental calculations of the discussion occurring at the table. Eventually, she retreated briefly to the kitchen, not out of fear, but necessity. The conversation at the architect's table had highlighted the flaw she had identified, and it gnawed at her like a loose thread. With trembling hands, part adrenaline, part frustration, she pulled a napkin from the holder and began to sketch. The pencil moved almost instinctively, drawing lines, angles, stress points, and potential reinforcements. Each stroke was precise yet hurried, her mind racing through calculations faster than any pen could keep pace. The smells of the kitchen, garlic, sizzling meat, steam, seemed distant, the world reduced to graphite and thought, an intimate space where only her skill mattered. Unbeknownst to her, Samuel Vega, Hale's partner, had come into the kitchen briefly to fetch a glass for his table. He paused when he noticed her concentration, the furrowed brow, the intensity of her gaze as the pencil scratched the napkin. Samuel's curiosity grew. He observed quietly, careful not to startle her, realizing the sketches represented far more than mere doodles. They were solutions, professional-grade insights capable of influencing a multi-million-dollar project. He leaned subtly against the counter, eyes narrowing slightly, shock and admiration warring on his expression. When Elena finally returned to the dining room, her napkin safely folded in her apron pocket, Hale noticed the subtle spark of determination. He leaned forward, voice dripping with condescension. "Miss, do you really think you can understand the work my engineers are doing? This is beyond a simple waitressing job." The words carried mockery, but there was a tension underneath, a flicker of curiosity he did not yet admit. The architects chuckled softly, but Samuel raised an eyebrow, subtly signaling Hale to temper his arrogance, though silently, without attracting attention. The night grew heavier with unspoken challenges. Hale's smirk broadened as he placed his hand lightly near the wine glass in front of him, the subtle glint of amusement in his eyes. "Perhaps you'd like to comment on my project while you serve the hors d'oeuvres?" he asked, mockingly. Elena's fingers tightened around her tray, but her voice remained calm. "I'll serve your orders first, sir," she said. Her eyes met his, holding steady, and in that moment, a quiet tension built, the kind that promised storms under calm surfaces. Hale's laughter rang out lightly, a melody of dominance and arrogance. He lifted the glass, deliberately tilting it slightly toward her uniform, not enough yet to spill, but enough to send a shiver of anticipation down her spine. "Careful," he murmured, mock serious. "Even your cleverness has limits. We wouldn't want you to cross them." Elena's heart raced, feeling the warmth of the liquid soak through, but she quickly masked her reaction, holding her chin high and her posture unbroken. One of the architects stifled a laugh, while another raised an eyebrow, surprised by the audacity of the act. This is a lesson," Hale said, his voice soft but carrying weight. "A reminder of limits. Overstep and there is a price." He leaned back, chuckling, eyes glinting with cruel amusement. The table around him laughed, though Elena could detect unease in some expressions. There was something more serious under the veneer of jest. She held her composure, breathing steadily, and met his gaze directly. "I understand, sir," she said, calm and unwavering, her voice carrying a quiet defiance that surprised even herself. Hale's laughter faded, replaced by a sharp, curious glance. There was something in her eyes, a calm intelligence that refused to bow, even under humiliation. He had expected fear, perhaps flustered apologies. Instead, he found resilience. The architects at the table exchanged glances, murmurs of amusement tinged with admiration. Samuel Vega, Hale's partner, observed silently from the edge of the room, his brow furrowed in intrigue rather than judgment. Elena excused herself, moving toward the kitchen, not out of retreat but necessity. The incident had stirred a mix of frustration and determination within her. She needed to focus, to channel the whirlwind of emotion into something constructive. Sliding open the kitchen door, she reached for a napkin and began sketching again. The pencil scratched across the paper with a rhythm both hurried and meticulous. Lines, angles, structural reinforcements, every detail she had observed earlier, every flaw in the plans she had overheard, she translated onto the humble napkin. The steam from the cooking and the warm aroma of freshly baked bread blurred into the background. Nothing existed in that moment except her mind and the problem before her. Samuel Vega, curious and cautious, lingered near the doorway, observing her from the shadows. He had been drawn here initially to fetch another glass for the table but now found himself frozen by the unexpected display of skill. The movements were quick yet deliberate, the sketches far beyond what an untrained hand could produce. There was an elegance in her lines, the precision of her annotations, and the clarity of her vision. Samuel's expression shifted from surprise to shock. He could not believe that someone so unassuming, someone he had barely noticed, could possess such insight. Elena paused for a moment, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes scanning the napkin. She was both proud and anxious, proud of the clarity of her solution, anxious that it would go unnoticed. She folded the napkin carefully, tucking it into her apron pocket before returning to the floor. Hale noticed her reemergence, his eyes narrowing slightly, a subtle smirk playing at the corners of his lips. He leaned toward Samuel, muttering, "Do you see her? Do you really think she can comprehend this work?" Samuel, keeping his tone low, responded with a subtle nod, "Watch closely. There may be more here than you think." Back at the table, the service resumed with Elena maintaining impeccable composure. Hale's smirk returned, tinged with a new note of challenge. "Miss Sinclair," he said, voice low but sharp, "I trust you understand the appropriate boundaries for someone in your role." Elena's lips pressed into a thin line, nodding politely. Her gaze flicked briefly to the napkin tucked inside her apron, a secret repository of insight and strategy, unseen yet potent. Later, when the restaurant had calmed and Hale's table was preparing to leave, Samuel approached Elena discreetly. "Miss Sinclair," he said softly, ensuring Hale was distracted, "may I see your notes? The sketches you were working on." Elena blinked, surprised, but nodded slightly, pulling the folded napkin from her apron. Samuel studied it, his eyes widening as he traced the lines and calculations. He could not hide his astonishment. This could be invaluable," he whispered, almost to himself. Hale's smirk faltered slightly as he observed the exchange from the table. There was a flicker of unease, a recognition that the young woman he had so casually mocked might just possess the very skill he had believed beyond her reach. Samuel's glance toward Hale was subtle but pointed, a silent message. Perhaps she is more than she appears. The morning after the restaurant incident, Elena woke to the same anxiety that had kept her tossing and turning all night. Her uniform was back in the closet. Her mind, however, was still occupied by the spilled wine, the cruel laughter, and the sharp mockery from Hale. She had almost convinced herself she would never step into that glass tower, never let him see her again. Then the call came. Clara Vega, Hale's assistant, spoke on the phone with a clipped efficiency that left no room for argument. "Elena Sinclair," she said, "Mr. Hale requests your presence at the firm. He wants to see you regarding last night's sketches. Please arrive by 10. Elena stared at the phone, disbelief and lingering fear warring with the pulse of determination she felt in her chest. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't an invitation to reconcile. It was professional. Objective. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite it. Swallowing hard, she agreed. The streets leading to Hale Enterprises were already alive with morning traffic, but Elena barely noticed. Every reflective window, every honking car blurred past as she rehearsed the scenario in her mind. She imagined him laughing again, dismissing her, the weight of yesterday pressing against her chest, but she pushed it aside. This wasn't about pride. This was about the work, about seeing her correction implemented and proving that her observations weren't just right, they were critical. Upon entering the building, Elena was met by Samuel, Hale's partner, who gave her a subtle nod. "You're going to do fine," he said quietly, guiding her past the security checkpoint. His calm presence was reassuring. Unlike Hale, Samuel didn't wield intimidation. He simply observed, evaluated, and acted with quiet precision. For a moment, Elena allowed herself to imagine him as an anchor in the storm that was about to come. The elevator ride was tense, the polished walls reflecting her own anxious face back at her. She took a deep breath, thinking of the napkin in her pocket, the sketch she had drawn late into the night in the restaurant kitchen while tears had blurred her vision. She remembered the logic, the equations, the subtle adjustment to the building's support beams that could prevent a potential catastrophe. It wasn't genius, it was careful observation and understanding, skills her father had drilled into her since childhood. He had spent evenings with her at the dining table, blueprints spread across the surface, teaching her how to spot structural flaws, how to think ahead, how to challenge assumptions quietly but relentlessly. He had made her believe that even the smallest mind could uncover the biggest mistakes if it refused to accept things at face value. When the elevator doors opened to the 42nd floor, Elena was met by Clara, whose sharp eyes swept over her from head to toe. There was no warmth, no empathy, only efficiency. "Boardroom. Now," she said, and without waiting for a response, began walking toward the sleek, glass-encased heart of the firm. Elena followed, the echo of her shoes on the polished floor emphasizing the tension that clung to her every step. Inside the boardroom, Hale waited. He had shed the arrogance of the previous night only partially. His posture was straight, his eyes alert, but there was an unmistakable curiosity there. Elena's heart pounded as she stepped closer, placing the napkin gently on the conference table. The pencil lines traced the critical flaw she had spotted in his team's design, lines that would prevent an immense structural failure. Hale's expression changed slowly, a transformation from skepticism to recognition, and finally to astonishment. "You identified this?" he asked, his voice tight with disbelief. His chief engineer, Robert Kane, leaned forward, scrutinizing the tiny sketch. His initial smirk had faded, replaced with a furrowed brow, as he traced the lines with his eyes. Samuel, standing quietly beside Hale, met Elena's gaze for a brief moment. He didn't speak, but the subtle nod he gave her said everything. "You were right. We see it." Elena's voice, steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her, explained the correction in detail. She spoke of load distribution, material stress, and counterbalances, using precise language she had learned from years of study under her father and in her architectural courses. Her hands moved to indicate the angles and connections on the napkin. "If you adjust the cantilever supports here and redistribute the load along these beams, the design compensates for wind shear and seismic shifts simultaneously. It's minor but critical." Silence fell across the room. Hale, Kane, and the other executives leaned in, eyes fixed on her delicate handwriting and confident explanations. For the first time, Elena realized the full power of her own knowledge, the impact of her careful attention to detail, of her hours spent learning, observing, and practicing. Hale's voice broke the silence. I underestimated you," he admitted, his tone unusually low, almost vulnerable. "You've not just corrected a flaw, you've potentially saved the project, the firm, and a great deal of money. I owe you an apology, Elena." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Elena felt a tension lift slightly from her shoulders. This wasn't the man who had spilled wine and mocked her. This was someone who, finally, saw her for what she was: capable, precise, and invaluable. Hale's hand extended toward her. "I want you with us, permanently. Head of a new architectural analysis team. Name your terms, Elena. You've earned it." Elena blinked, absorbing the weight of his words. The humiliation, the doubts, the relentless anxiety, all of it faded as clarity and pride took its place. Her father's lessons, her nights spent sketching in despair, had led to this moment. Thank you," she said quietly, her voice a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you for seeing my work and for giving me this opportunity." Hale nodded, a faint smile breaking through his usual controlled exterior. "You deserve it," he said. Samuel, standing slightly apart, allowed himself the slightest grin, as if pleased that she had proven them all wrong. From that day, Elena's life began anew. The project moved forward with her adjustments fully implemented. She guided a team of engineers and junior architects, her insights now respected rather than doubted. Kane, initially skeptical and dismissive, became a willing collaborator, and even Hale himself occasionally sought her counsel before making strategic decisions. Beyond professional triumph, Elena's personal growth was profound. She realized that even in the face of mockery and apparent defeat, her skills and integrity could not be denied. She also acknowledged the kindness of Samuel, whose quiet encouragement had helped her navigate the intimidating corporate world. At a private dinner later that week, she made a subtle gesture of thanks to him, acknowledging the support that had been pivotal to her success. And so, from spilled wine and whispered derision in a crowded restaurant, Elena Sinclair emerged not only victorious but transformed. Her talent, once overlooked, became the cornerstone of a flourishing career. Her life, previously marked by uncertainty and dismissal, now held promise, purpose, and recognition. She had proven that intelligence, persistence, and integrity could turn even the cruelest humiliation into the foundation for greatness. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little courage today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel.